So how does Piaget contribute to the study of fairy tales? Well, Anton Favat applies Piaget's theories of development to help understand the interest of children in fairy tales by beginning with the question why only certain types of fairy tales are preferred at certain times of their lives, and then children seem to grow out of them. So he's interpreting data that he has already collected. And then sometimes returning to the tales later as adults with a different type of appreciation. Well, why do adults find them interesting? Well, he finds that children around 5 can start reading fairy tales, and there is an interest in these tales until about 9 to the age of 11. Empirical investigations that link fantasy with fairy tales, with their preference reaching a high point around 7 or 8 years of age, and then their lowest point between ages 10 and 12. Whereas tales that have predominantly more real historical figures and plots that are at their lowest popularity between 7 and 8, with the highest point of popularity between ages 10 and 12. Before the age of 5, there was to be shown a greater interest in talking beast tales and animal stories and simple fairy tales. At age 8, stories of real life became more interesting, and they grow more favorable through ages 9 and 10, while interest begins falling off in fairy tales and replaced by travel stories and stories of popular heroes. First graders liked stories with princesses and princes, talking animals, magic rings, not astronauts, TV personalities, and bridge building like the older children did. So magical beliefs. Children believe in magic when they are little, that objects have relationships to things they do not, that they can directly influence each other, even when there's no spatial or causal relationship. And this belief in magic uses participation to modify reality. An object or place can be used to influence another object. For example, a girl wanted to pick water lilies, and so she threw stones close to her at the edge so they might grow there. A young boy was watching his father fire a rifle, so he began pointing with a feather, believing that every bullseye his father struck was aided by his father, or aided by his feather. And he eventually stopped because he didn't want to wear out or overuse this magic. A young boy didn't want to walk on the cracks of the pavement, so instead he touched every signpost to counteract as a misstep, not walking under ladders, etc. And these children believe that magical acts can be evoked so that one object can act on that of another, that they themselves can be ruler of the world, making sun, moon, stars, clouds on command, making them move when they wanted them to. So when does magic come into play in a fairy tale, and in what form? Whenever there is magical influence over actions, for example, in Sleeping Beauty, that a kiss can awaken the Sleeping Beauty out of her slumber, or the prick of a finger can begin the spell of slumber. In The Six Swans, breathing on each other changes their clothing, or in The Wild Swans, that throwing the shirts over them changes them back into human form. Cinderella's magical object, the pumpkin coach, mice to horses, rats to coachmen, lizard to footmen. In The 12 Brothers, picking 12 lilies changes the brothers into enchanted black ravens. Well, the relationships between thoughts and things, wishes, are believed to be handled by magic. For example, Cinderella wishes to a tree, and the birds perched upon it bring her what she needs. There are also foolish wishes, such as in The Seven Ravens, where the father wishes his tardy sons were turned into ravens, and so they are. In The Table, the Ass, and the Stick, the table is covered through evocation. After saying the words bric-a-brac, or saying stick out of the sack, the magic ensues, or as Cinderella evokes, the good into the pot, the bad into the crop. These are all instances of magical speech, or mentioning the name of Rumpelstiltskin can destroy him, or mentioning Ian Hans's name brings him to appear. There are also animist beliefs in children, and a child believes that many inanimate objects are living and conscious. The first stage from 6 to 7 has a child in which objects are thought to be conscious. Even if stationary, they are connected to activity, like a rock. The second stage from 6 to 7 to 8 to 9, it assigns consciousness to things that can move and a special function to that of being in motion, such as the sun, the moon, bikes, and watches. They all have sort of some type of personality. The third stage, 8 to 9 to 11 to 12, they can make a distinction between movement, introduced as an outside agent, and object itself. So only conscious bodies move themselves, such as it's still assumed to be with the sun and moon, but not bikes, trains, or cars, which need operators. The fourth stage, 11 to 12 and onward, is restricted to animals, people, and insects. If you look at the peak of interest from 6 to 8, There's no animism in our fairy tales that needs to be excluded. For example, in Sweetheart Roland, the murdered sister leaves 3 drops of blood from her head, and when he asks where she is, they answer on the stairs, in the kitchen, and in the bed. The 7 ravens. Objects are in motion, traveling to the end of the world, rebuffed by the sun that devours children and the dismal and dreary moon, the stars. However, they befriend her. Here we have also a consciousness provided to animals, which is really the most common form, like in the Frog King, or the bear in Snow White and Red Rose, or Rose Red, the servant that overhears the duck in White Snake, the doves that speak in Cinderella, telling the prince, prithee look back, there's blood on the track, the shoe is too small, at home is the true bride waiting thy call. So there are also 2 moralities that the child discerns in the fairy tales at this young age, and there's the morality of constraint, and younger children at the target of age of 7 to 8 often accept the hierarchy and prohibitions as moral absolutes. Authority is unquestioned and sacred. Justice for them is whatever the authority figure demands. As they develop towards independence, however, they see that morality is a cooperative endeavor formed out of reciprocal relationships with others based on mutual and lateral respect. So morality is an autonomous good at this later stage with independence, and it's essential to a functioning group. Justice at later ages is seen in terms of equality and equity. Punishments are retributive at the later stages, as rewards and punishments are meted out for merit or guilt. That is, however, not the world of the target age of 7 to 8 or younger. At that time, expiatory punishment is preferred, where there is no relationship between the guilty act and the nature of its punishment. Instead, severity and avoidance imply guilt. Children prefer this type of punishment at that age because it powerfully coerces individuals back to their duty and brings home their guilt through the act of punishment itself. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling action. Pain brings about self-realization, and the logic that the more pain, the more convincing the argument is for them of that guilt. Their view is in line with authoritarian penal models. And a lot of this kind of punishment is present in fairy tales. For example, the Goose Girl, the imposter is rolled down a hill in a barrel with spikes turned inward. In King Thrushbeard, his wife is humiliated repeatedly until her spirit is broken. Or in The Fisherman and His Wife, they're punished for usurping hierarchy and are summarily reduced back to poverty. So Cinderella's imposter sisters are also blinded. These punishments are memorable because of their severity, and they correspond to the child's notion of what is just for that type of punishment and that type of action. The respect for authority is the world of the fairy tale, where the laws of the adults are law, and we often see our protagonists, these children, challenge these and win, whether it is Bluebeard's prohibition, Snow White's ignoring the cottage sign, or the Frog Prince's refusal and smack against the wall that brings her the prince. They are developing towards a more equitable type of morality, however, on what is just and what is not. Is it just to give up a baby for a piece of lettuce, or to wish death upon an infant because you weren't invited to their baptism, or to transform men into birds because some water lilies were plucked? Not really. In these stories, the protagonists fight for a justice that takes account of individuality and the merits of what is just for that punishment. What about causation? Well, in most fairy tales, causal relationships are paratactic. One thing happens simultaneously as another, and so the two are set into a causal relationship, often metaphorical, such as in The White Snake, where the apple is cut in half and shared, and so then their hearts fill with love. The cause of things is also egocentric in that the self is often viewed at odds with the world. Parents assist from beyond the grave. Nature reflects the feeling of the protagonist, and one's desires and thoughts find expression in the natural, in this literary world. In Cinderella, the tree provides with the doves for her when needed. In Briar Rose, the thorns keep away all the suitors until the right one comes along. And children believe that their thoughts and desires are known and shared by those around them. So the tales are popular because they embody the logic of the child. They are accurate representations of the child's conception of the world. At older ages, the tales become popular as a form of escapism and regression to an earlier, more innocent age in which belief in magic was still unchallenged and the world unchanged. So if we look at the tale of the fisherman and his wife, we can identify several aspects that would categorize the tale as preferred by the younger 7 to 8 age group. There is the talking fish, which is animism, evocation, the calling and changing of the state. The natural world reflects the growing disparity in the challenge of hierarchy by the wife as a form of egocentrism. The morality in which the couple is reduced to poverty, left with nothing, would be fair because of the unattempted usurpation of the patriarchal organization of the world. Well, in the tale of the worn-out dancing shoes, we have more of a procedural, investigative, rudimentary scientific process described to find out what they are doing. This tale would fall into the category of preference for the older 11 to 12-year-olds. There is no animism, although a magic cloak is used and transportation contains some elements. There is little egocentrism, only the collection of evidence, the full explanation of how he is aided to avoid being drugged to sleep, and how his gathering of evidence helps his argument and forces a confession. To show really that this is also not a preferred tale for the younger readers, the chosen bride is also older and is explained as the most rational choice. They are of like age, as even though the youngest features in much of the tale as the one who notices that things are amiss.